Um, so today you're gonna have some time at the end to just like work on whatever you need to. But I want to go over just a few things today before that. Yesterday in class we talked about kind of the most pivotal moment in the book, the all right then I'll go to hell discussion. So if you haven't had a chance to watch that yet, you should do that, and then there's an assignment on Canvas that you'll complete. And today we're going to talk over the end of the book, which is semi-problematic in some ways. So were any of you able to finish the book? Okay, very close, that's good. I think you probably got into at least part of the part that's problematic. So we'll go over that. I want to go over your Huck Finn final first, so that you know what to expect on that. I went over it in the video yesterday, but in case you didn't watch it, I just thought we could go over it really quick. On Canvas, for the Huck Finn final, it's going to be due by December 6th. So that gives you plenty of time to prepare and to finish the book. This is the final, so I'm just going to show it to you. So it's not a surprise, I'm not trying to trick you up. But I do want to make sure that you solidify some ideas about Huck Finn and some of the things that we've discussed. So there's 4 parts. The first part asks you if you read the book, like how much you read, okay? Do not do the final before you have finished the book. That is not good points wise, okay? So just give yourself enough time. You've got until the 6th. You've got plenty of time to finish it, even if you're not that far right now, okay? So that's you to put like what page you got to, which should be the last page, and then to sign it with your honorable signature, because you can't pray a lie, which comes from the book, and it's funny. Okay. You may use your notes and the book on this test. The only thing you can't do is you can't talk to each other about it, because this is about what you know, not what your neighbor knows. And if you're asking other people to do your thinking for you, or you're giving your thinking to someone else, you're denying them the opportunity to learn this stuff, right? So do not do a beautiful job in your exam and then give it to someone else, okay? That is still cheating. Even if you feel like you're being magnanimous, you're not, okay? The second part is a short answer that goes over some significant people and concepts in the book. Those are Huck as the narrator, Tom Sawyer, Pap, the river, the King and the Duke, Mary Jane Wilkes. We talked about her yesterday, so make sure you watch out your videos too before you take this, so that you've got all those concepts. Jim and Huck's relationship, and then the ending of the novel, which we will talk about today. What you'll do in those is you're going to tell me the significance of those concepts or characters in the novel, and then you're going to give an example from the text. It doesn't need to be a direct quote, but it does need to be more specific than he's nice or whatever, right? Like, so be more specific, something like, well, when Jim and Huck are having a conversation about King Solomon, like that would be a specific example, right? Not just like, he's nice, or they're on the raft together, like, okay, but that's like the whole book, so be a little more specific than that, okay? Those are each worth 3 points. Then the third part is just a paragraph where you are going to pick one of 2 things. Either where Huck is describing the Grangerfords' house, where we talked about Kitch and the Grangerfords, right? Or the scene where Huck describes living on the river. So there's a paper for each of those, so you could use that to help you on this. But using quotes from the text, explain the pattern that Twain weaves through the scene and defend the significance of this pattern in the context of the novel. So we annotated for some diddles, we talked about some patterns between the Kitch and the Grangerfords, right, and who the Grangerfords are and how they appear, but how they are on the inside, right, where we talked about the shore versus the river and how it's like the symbolic representation of society, and then on the river, that peace and freedom from society. So look at the patterns that are creating those deeper meanings, right, and talk about the significance, okay? And that paragraph just needs to kind of fill the rest of that page, so it doesn't have to be the full page, it could be like half a page, okay? And then the last one is an essay response, okay? So it's a 4-paragraph essay where you are going to explain the conflict that Huck faces between his sound heart and his deformed conscience. We talked in depth about that yesterday, so you'll want to go over that I'll go to hell annotations and watch the video from yesterday. Then after, so you're going to pick 3 specific scenes, and that's one of them, so you want to make sure that you understand that one. And then 2 other scenes that that show that conflict. Then look at what larger, universally applicable theme is conveyed through Huck's struggle. So your paragraphs, like your body paragraphs in this, you'll have an intro and a conclusion, and 2 body paragraphs should be pretty chunky. So yeah, any questions on that? Okay, again, you can use your book, you can use your notes, anything that you've written down, or any assignments you've turned in. You can just not use your neighbor, okay? Just like COVID, stay away from other people, okay? Okay, great. So let's talk about the end of the book. So after he says, all right, then I go to hell, and in that conversation he's deciding between whether to tell Miss Watson where Jim is and return him to slavery, or to help bust him out, right? And it's confusing to him because Jim is his friend, and but he's been taught his whole life that like slavery is okay, and that if a slave escapes, he's someone's property, you need to return him or you're stealing, right? Like there's this pull between what he has learned from Miss Watson, who represents kind of religion and that aspect of life, versus what he feels and what he knows when he's with Jim. And so he finally decides that he can't pray a lie, he can't pray to be able to return Jim, and so he's going to free him, and he'll go to hell if need be, right? And that's kind of an ironic but also very powerful moment where he decides, I'm going to put my best interests behind me and do what I think is right for my friend, which is amazing, right? Especially during this time where even when Mark Twain is writing it after slavery has ended, Black people are not treated well, right? And so this is a big moment in the book. So then, right after that moment, who shows up? What goes down? For those of you who have read past that. Yeah. They're just washing the door now.
He goes to this person's house, and they think that he's Tom Sawyer, and then Tom Sawyer shows up.
Yeah, right. So he is trying to figure out where Jim is. He hears he's down on this farm, right? So he goes down to it, and they're like, "Oh, you're here!" And he's like, "I'm here, but like, why are you expecting me?" Basically, and so he's just kind of playing along because that's what he does, right? He just goes with it. And they're like, "Oh, Tom Sawyer," and he's like, "Well, what? Look, I know everything about Tom. I can be Tom, right?" But then Tom shows up, right? Because he's coming down to visit his Aunt Sally, and he's like, what are we going to do now, right? And so then Tom Sawyer pretends to be his younger brother, and it's just very entertaining. At first, Tom thinks that Huck is a dead ghost, right? Because he's like, "Dude, you died." And he's like, "Please don't haunt me." He's like, "I'm not dead," right? So that's just very funny. But, so they get there, and what do they decide to do together? Anyone know after that? Okay, well, Jim is locked up, right? He's behind the house in a little cabin, and Huck just levels with Tom. He's like, "Listen, I know this is evil, but I'm going to bust him out." And he is shocked because Tom decides, "Well, okay, I'll help you." Right? But it's interesting because right as he says it, he hesitates a little bit. Maybe I should find my copy so that I can... Anyway, he hesitates for a minute, and he's like, "But okay, yeah, I will help you bust him out." And Huck is shocked because he's like, I didn't think Tom was so low down like me. Like, I can't believe he would also risk his reputation and soul to save a slave and to free him like that. Wow, that's pretty cool. But Tom what did he represent when we talked about him before? Do you guys remember? Which movement he represented? Yeah.
Sounds like romanticism.
Romanticism, right? So he comes back, and when Huck's like, here's my plan, right? But he's like, but I know your plan's going to be better. Does anyone know what Tom's plans are like? Yeah, I think Hazelnut would tell us.
Yeah, they're just like all like crazy and like super like complicated and unnecessary and stuff.
Yeah, they're ridiculous, right? So Huck's like, okay, the latch isn't very good, so we'll just like wait till night, bust him out, and be out of here, right? But Tom is like, well, where's the artistry in that? Like, what kind of a book do you know of that it's that easy, right? Like, we gotta stretch this out a little and make it real. And so Huck just goes along with him, right? Do you remember any of the antics they go through, or the tricks that they play in that area? Well, some of them are like, some of the things they do, they've got like, you gotta have a rope ladder, and they're like, there's not even like a place to get down. They're like, it doesn't matter. So they like bake this rope ladder into a pie, and they're like stealing spoons from their aunt's house to dig him out. They have him like try to write with his blood on this shirt, but he can't write because he's a slave, and people don't, like, they don't teach slaves how to write because then they can communicate, right? So it looks like chicken scratch, and then they're like, you should probably have some spiders and snakes in there, and Jim's like, I don't want that, and he's like, no, you need to. This is like part of it, right? And then like he's tied to the bed, right? But all you have to do is lift up the bed to take it out. But they're like, no, we need to saw off the bed leg to get him off. We might even need to saw his leg off to get him out, but maybe not. And they decide that finally that they're not going to saw his leg off because that's a little unnecessary, right? But it's like ridiculous, right? And Tom's like, at any point we can just decide that we got to get him out now, but let's just like play this as long as we can, do the right thing here in trying to escape, do right by like these authors. And he's just like ridiculous, right? He goes through every like story he knows of and like adds that in there, until finally he actually writes a note that's like, someone is going to try and escape or whatever, and get Jim out, and alerts people, and Tom ends up getting shot in the leg as he's running away, and because of that, so they get far away, and Tom doesn't tell Huck until they're like on the river with Jim, and he's not doing well, right? He's losing a lot of blood, and so Huck's like, ugh. So Jim's like, you need to go back. And Jim like realizes that this could cost him his freedom, but he's a good person, right? And he's like, I don't want Tom to die. And so they go back and they find someone, and Jim is again taken into slavery. And then we find out that the irony of this whole situation is that Jim is actually free, that Miss Watson has died, and that he was free the whole time. And Tom knew that. So Tom didn't really care about freeing the slave. He only cared about these antics and this like play acting, right? Which is despicable. Like, it makes me hate Tom so bad, right? And then after that, so the book just kind of ends, right? They free Jim, and he goes back, we assume, to his family, and Huck decides that he can't go back to where he was. He can't go back to civilization because that's just not him anymore. And so he decides to go west, right? This is a weird ending, right? We have this powerful moment, I'll go to hell, and then he goes back to torturing Jim, essentially, because Tom is there. And a lot of scholars are like, just stop reading after that moment, like after the I'll go to hell moment, just like stop, because it's ruined. Twain wrote himself into a corner, and it sucked. So that is one interpretation, that he just, whatever, kind of lost it. Other interpretations are that Mark Twain actually stopped writing the book for a while. I'm not sure exactly where in it, but he couldn't figure out how to end it. And then he takes a trip down the river, down south, into like the deep south, right? And when he comes back, then he writes the ending to this novel. And when he goes down river, what he sees then, because this is after slavery, is Reconstruction, right? And Reconstruction is where they're rebuilding the South after the Civil War, and they have freed the slaves, right? And so black people are technically free, but a lot of scholars think that Reconstruction was a complete and utter mess, right? It didn't really work out, because black people, even though they were free, they were really no better off, right? And so he sees that, and they say that he decided that he wanted to write kind of that failure of America to treat blacks better and the slaves better. So when he wrote the end of the novel, even though Jim is free, he's not really free, and he's still mistreated by white people. And that kind of mirrors Reconstruction there, right, where black people are free, and yet they're really not. Like, they are forced to sharecrop, they're treated poorly, they really don't have a ton more rights than when they were slaves, right? And instead, at least when they were slaves, they were fed, right? And now they're still treated pretty bad, but they have to pay for their stuff too. So that could be one interpretation of the end of the novel. Another could be that Tom represents romanticism, and Mark Twain hates romanticism so much that he wants to show the terrible effects of like romanticism on reality, and he just really wants to make us hate it as much as he does and drag it out. And then I read this other thing, like just this morning, where some people think that even though literarily that seems like a failure, psychologically what Tom does is actually pretty spot on, where he is a young child, right? And if your best friend shows up someone that you're familiar with, peer pressure becomes a big thing again, and he kind of loses those gains that he had made. So even though for us as a reader, we're like, oh, that's a tragedy that he continues to treat Jim bad, psychologically it may not be far off, because when you're reintroduced to something that you're used to, you kind of fall into your old routines, right? So there's a lot of controversy surrounding the ending of this book. So what I want you to do is, on Canvas, I want you to think about the ending of the book. Okay? This is more exciting when we have all read it, but I realize it's very difficult this year for you guys to watch a video one day and then have everything done by the next day. Like, I get that, right? But based on basically my little mini lecture on the end of the novel, I want you to decide what you think Mark Twain is doing from the point that Tom Sawyer shows up to help free Jim until the end. Use examples in your response to back your analysis. So what do you think, what do you make of the ending, right? Of the interpretations that I share with you, is there one that resonates? Have you thought of a different interpretation for the end? This, if you've read far enough into it, you can, like, right, this obviously, if you're a little behind, this is a more difficult assignment, okay? Questions on what you do this. Okay, so it's like 200 words, so that's like not super long. I think that this right here is like 60, right? So not super long response, but just like a little chunky paragraph. Okay, so that's all I really have for you today, because I want to give you time to work on stuff that you need to. So you should have finished the book. If you haven't, you want to do that. Your satire project will be due the day that you come back from Thanksgiving break. So that is the 1st of December, which is crazy. What you need to do is, if you were gone, make sure that you go over the satire project requirements. There's a project and there is a reflection. We're going to share them in class that day. Okay, so make sure that you have at least the project done so that you can share that. You don't need to share your reflection, right? You can do, again, whatever your heart desires. I've had lots of different genres of satire that were successful. Their videos seem to be a popular one, but I've had people make really cool posters, or like write a satirical article. I had someone do a song once that was quite impressive. Whatever you want. I cannot encourage you to work with other people, but I don't really care if you do, but you do need to turn your own reflection if you work with someone. And also, it is not my fault because I did not tell you to, so if you get the Rona, that's on you, okay? You can satirize whatever you want. I get a lot of teacher satire or school satire, which is totally fine. Like, I'm not offended by that. I'm maybe expecting a little bit of COVID satire this year, because you should take something that you're mad about and just like let it out, right? Okay, so have that done, and then obviously there are not too many of us in this class, so after that we will watch part of the Huckfin, and I shall bring us donuts to enjoy. So you can eat my donuts, share your project, and enjoy the cheesy Huckfin movie by Disney. Okay? Questions? Okay, so I feel like there's plenty to work on, whether it's finishing Huckfin, your satire project, your Huckfin final. Oh, and I guess there was like a link messed up on your multiple choice thing, but I fixed it for the multiple choice essay tips. I guess that document wasn't showing up, but it should show up now. So if you haven't done that and you're confused on that, and it's still broken, let me know. Okay? All right, excellent. Try not to be so chatty, it's so awkward.